All right, my favorite part of the video, Bible time. I'm not a pastor, I just like sharing the Bible. Just a normal Christian, so that's what I'm doing here. Today I'm continuing the Hebrews 11 Hall of Faith with person number 13, Barak. His passage is found in Hebrews 11:32. And what more shall I say? I do not have time to tell about Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, about David and Samuel and the prophets. So that's a window into the next ones I'm going to cover. Man, Samson's an interesting one. Barak is an interesting one. His story is in the book of Judges. Chapter 4 has a narrative about what happened, and then chapter 5 has a song of Deborah and Barak. Also fills in some other details. But what's interesting about this story is that Deborah and Jael, two women, have what seem to be more prominent roles in the story than Barak does. Yeah, particularly Jael, who ends up killing the commander of the army, Sisera, the enemy army. But Barak is the one highlighted in the Hall of Faith, so that's what I'm going to try to focus on today. And there's not a ton on Barak specifically, but I'll try to go over the main parts here. Since we are in the book of Judges, I'll cover that familiar cycle of the book of Judges. So it just keeps recurring over and again. First, Israel is unfaithful. There's idolatry. They do evil in the sight of the Lord. Second, bad things happen to them. They usually get oppressed. Third, Israel calls for help to God. Fourth, God sends a judge. And then 5, the people turn from their wicked ways. And then they go back to the beginning. Rinse and repeat. Just go back to being unfaithful again. And the whole cycle continues. That's the book of Judges cycle. So I'll start with the first bullet point, Israel being unfaithful. That's described in Judges 4, verse 1. Again, that's explaining this has happened before, this darn cycle. Doing it again. The Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Now that Ehud was dead. Ehud was the previous judge. Second bullet point, bad things happened to Israel. It's in Judges 4, verse 2 through the first half of verse 3. So the Lord sold them into the hands of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. Sisera, the commander of the army, was based in Harosheth Hagoyim because he had 900 chariots fitted with iron and cruelly oppressed the Israelites for 20 years. That's them being oppressed. And then I'll finish the sentence with the third bullet, Israel calls for help. So finishing that sentence of verse 3, it says, they cried to the Lord for help. Okay, now the fourth bullet, God sending a judge. He did. And the judge is actually Deborah. That's the judge he says. She's the only female judge mentioned in the book of Judges. And that's found in Judges 4, verses 4 to 5. Now Deborah, a prophet, the wife of Lapidoth, was leading Israel at that time. Amazing. She held court under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites went up to her to have their disputes decided. That's being a judge. She's deciding their disputes. She's convicting them to return back to the Lord. So Israel's being oppressed. We have that already. They're being oppressed for 20 years by the army of Sisera. So in order to get out of the oppression, they're going to have to overthrow Sisera's army. So Deborah calls Barak to lead the army of Israel. Judges 4, verse 6 through 8. It's talking about Deborah. She sent for Barak, son of Abinoam, from Kedesh to Naphtali, and said to him, the Lord, the God of Israel, commands you. Go, take with you 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zebulun, and lead them up to Mount Tabor. And of course, I is speaking of the Lord. I will lead Sisera. God is going to lead Sisera into that valley of the Kishon River and give Sisera and his army over to the Israelites. That's a promise. God's making this promise. And then verse 8, Barak said to her, if you go with me, I will go. But if you don't go with me, I won't go. That seems odd. He's being hesitant. Why is he hesitant here? My study Bible actually has a good explanation for this. It says, Barak wisely hesitated to lead the armies of Israel without receiving guidance from God through Deborah. He knows Deborah is telling him the word of God, so he wants her there. He wants her to advise him, what do I do next? He's not confident in his own ability to discern God's will. And apparently this is wise. That's good. And we know he did the right action because he's listed as one of the heroes of faith. The study Bible continues, he is listed as one of the heroes of faith, Hebrews 11:32, because he trusted God and depended on God's spokesperson. That's what the study Bible says. It makes sense to me. What follows after that is that Barak leads the 10,000 soldiers against the Canaanites. The Canaanites' iron chariots were very powerful in the valley they were fighting in. It was a great place for chariots to just zip around and totally destroy the other army. It's far superior technology to what the Israelites had. But God tipped the battle in the favor of the Israelites. The Song of Deborah and Barak explains in Judges 5:21, the river Kishon swept them away, the age-old river, the river Kishon. March on, my soul, be strong. So God caused the river to overflow or something and muddy up all the valley to make the iron chariots ineffective. Okay, the Study Bible explains, I might repeat myself, sorry if I do. The river Kishon is a significant geographical feature in the biblical narrative located in the northern part of Israel. It played a crucial role in the defeat of Sisera's army as described in Judges 4 and 5. The river's flooding, likely caused by a sudden storm, it's definitely caused by a sudden storm, that's explained later, but likely caused by a sudden storm, rendered the chariots of Sisera ineffective, leading to their defeat. This event highlights God's intervention in the battle, as natural elements are used to accomplish divine purposes. The Kishon River's role in this victory is reminiscent of other instances where God uses nature to deliver his people, such as the parting of the Red Sea in Exodus 14. Yeah, so God was on Israel's side there, for sure. And just to round out the bullet points, at the end of the Song of Deborah and Barak, it says in Judges 5:31, so may all your enemies perish, Lord, but may all who love you be like the sun. When it rises in its strength, then the land had peace for 40 years. At this point, they love the Lord again, and therefore they have peace after that victory. They turn back to the Lord. They're going to go back, right in Judges 6, the next verse in the Bible, they did evil on the side of the Lord. So, I guess there was 40 years in between those two verses, but yeah, they did evil in the sight of the Lord again, resuming that Judges cycle. But let's zoom in on Barak and examine how his story aligns with the Hebrews 11 definition of faith. So let's go back to that definition. The New International Version that I've mentioned my kids use at school, so I like to use that one. It says, now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. So it's a couple pieces. Firstly, the confidence in what we hope for. This has to do with trusting God's promises. God specifically promised in Judges 4:7, and the Bible records it as the small quotation. So Deborah's quoting what God said and telling Barak what it was. God promised they would be victorious. He said, I will lead Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his troops to the Kishon River and give him into your hands. God is promising victory, and Barak trusted God's promise. When the time came, Barak obeyed God's command through Deborah, and this is in verse 4, 14, and 15. The time came, Deborah said to Barak, go. This is the day the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Has not the Lord gone ahead of you? So Barak went down Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him. At Barak's advance, the Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and army by the sword, and Sisera got down from his chariot and fled on foot. His king ran away. Israel had the victory because Barak trusted the Lord. And of course, Sisera was killed by Jael later, the tent spike, and then they had peace. But the point of this is that Barak trusted God's promise. Okay, the second part of that definition is assurance about what we do not see. Having faith that something we can't see is going to take care of this. Victory came from God's intervention, the river Kishon. Barak didn't know how victory would happen. God didn't say exactly how he was going to deliver them into his hands. He just said it was going to happen. And Barak trusted that. Judges 5, verses 4-5 said, when you, Lord, went out from Seir, when you marched from the land of Edom, the earth shook, the heavens poured, the clouds poured down water. The mountains quaked before the Lord, the one of Sinai, before the Lord, the God of Israel. So God has power over the weather, obviously. And Judges 5:20 says, from the heavens the stars fought. From their courses they fought against Sisera. God is fighting Sisera in this battle. Through faith, the unseen God gave victory to the Israelites. So they trusted God's promise, but they also knew that he was able to do it, even though how it was to be done was not known, it was unseen. There's another interesting point about this story, highlighting Barak's godly humility. And this comes from commentaries, but Barak served his role being led by a woman, Deborah, and knowing that the earthly glory would go to another woman, Jael, who killed Sisera. And this is notable because in that culture, it was very unconventional to submit to female leadership. And I'll read where it says he knew. So Deborah told him in Judges 4, the second half of verse 9, because of the course you are taking, the honor will not be yours, the earthly honor, for the Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman. Jael is going to end up killing Sisera. So Barak knew beforehand he wasn't going to get glory from this. He didn't need the glory, he was just following God. And Jesus himself commended humility like this. Jesus said in Luke 14:11, "For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted." And then Barak was actually exalted in the Hebrews 11 Hall of Faith. I think it is important, the fact that he, in humility, just followed God's leadership, even if it meant that a woman was going to get glory above him. He had faith in God's promises and assurance in the unseen. He's willing to do what God asked him to do. So a great example of faith. That's all I've got on Barak. Hopefully I did it justice. It's a little bit of a long narrative, and I didn't want to read every single verse in the narrative. So hopefully I didn't miss anything super important. Tried to do my best on that and follow the Lord's leadership in presenting this. But that's all I've got on the passage. If you want additional biblical analysis, I've linked 4 pastors in the description. And I've also linked my own personal church. If you're interested and want to see a sermon from my pastor, there's a link for that in the description. Now I'll close with a prayer. Lord, thank you for giving us direction in our lives. And I pray for faith. When I hear your small voice, when I get those convictions, Lord, I pray that you would give me faith to trust you, faith to do what you ask me to do. Just faith in your power to provide. When you're asking us to do something, that you will provide a way for it to be done. And Lord, I particularly pray that you would give me strength to share the gospel with others, particularly in person. Give me insight and intuition about how to do that, when to do that. I pray that for everyone watching too. Just give us courage and strength to share the gospel with others, with those who are not Christians, just to fulfill that great commission and to share the gospel, the good news, the story of salvation with all the earth. To you be the glory, Lord. Lord, I give you thanks for all the great things in my life. Please bless us all in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen. Now may the Lord of peace himself give you peace always and in every way. The Lord be with you all. See you next time.